Welcome to another episode of Diverse Perspectives. I am your host, Sharma, Seth, and we open our session with a land acknowledgement to recognize the territory that we have the privilege of living, working, and playing on, and also acknowledging the Indigenous nations who are the rightful and longtime stewards of this land.
Ojo, Sego, Tanshe, greetings. Halton Region acknowledges the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as well as the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and Anishinaabeg on which we gather. In stewardship with Mother Earth and the enduring Indigenous presence connected to these lands, we acknowledge the Indigenous nations of the past, present, and future. In the spirit of allyship and mutual respect, we will take the path of truth and reconciliation to create change, awareness, and equity as we strive to elevate the collective consciousness of society. Miigwech, Nyawe, Marcy, thank you.
It's a pleasure for me to introduce our next guest, Maryam Manteghi, local community resident, activist, family lawyer serving multicultural clients in the community, author of The Street of Good Fortune, where she talks about her time in Bosnia doing activist work. She's an advocate, born in Iran, came to Canada at the age of 4, and as a member of the Baha'i community has been in a position where they've not been able to return. So really excited to be in conversation with Maryam. Welcome.
Thank you, Leena. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Wonderful. And maybe tell us a little bit more about yourself if I missed anything critical, because I know I did my research, but what else do we need to know about you that we don't?
Well, I mean, you did cover, I'm a family lawyer, and I specifically assist and represent women who are victims of family violence and coercive control and are either in their relationship and trying to leave, or have left their relationship and are experiencing post-separation abuse.
And that's it's such heavy work and such important work. And one of I remember when we had our first conversation, you talked a little bit about Kira's Law and just the experience for women in the family courts. I wonder if you could tell us, I always tend to be like, what is the thing that we as citizens in this community need to know that we don't about the system?
So I think that people who have experienced the system have a vastly different idea and understanding of the system and what it can do and what it does do than people who haven't. And I think that people who haven't, who are lucky enough not to have had to experience the family court system, don't understand that the family court system, just like any other system in our country, is biased. It's biased just like all of the institutions that have systemic bias. And the systemic bias against racialized communities and women. And so we have serious issues then when it comes to the outcomes that women who are victims of family violence specifically can expect in these in this forum. And you mentioned Kira's Law, and I would like to speak about Kira's Law because maybe that will make it a little more comprehensible for a viewer that hasn't dealt with the family court system. Kira's Law was born when little Kira Kagan was the victim of a murder-suicide by her biological father, who had unsupervised access to her, so unsupervised parenting time with her, despite the fact that her mother, Dr. Jennifer Kagan, had worked really hard and had really advocated for herself to make sure, and for Kira to get supervised family time. And the court did not order that. And this is the result. And what really is the issue is the fact that family violence is a science. It's a study, and being trauma informed in family violence is something that's extremely necessary to be able to make decisions in family court that are effective and just. And that's not happening. And so that's where Kira's Law was born, was from the advocacy of Kira's mother, Dr. Jennifer Kagan, and her husband, Phil Viator, who Phil is also a family lawyer. And so and what Kira's law will ensure is that family judges are trained and educated in family violence and coercive control. They are not now. One of the things that I think most people will find extremely shocking is that many times family judges are judges who've had absolutely no background in family law. So they weren't family lawyers before they became judges. They could have been securities lawyers, contract lawyers, or lawyers that have absolutely nothing to do with any kind of family law, and real estate lawyers, whatever. And then they come in, they become judges, and they're thrown into a decision making, and almost godlike, with this godlike power, really, in the courtroom. Yes. And they're not equipped to make decisions that are healthy, to make decisions that are just, and to make decisions that are safe, that keep our children safe, keep our women safe. And that's a problem. And so Kira's law will ensure that even judges who've had family law training, a family law background, because not all lawyers who practice family law are trauma informed. Yes. So understand trauma, understand family violence, understand coercive control. These are all very specific, and sometimes very difficult concepts to pick out, to understand. And it takes a lot of training, and it takes a lot of self-awareness. And I think that we've, as a profession, we've failed. As a profession, we've really failed. And we really need to ensure that we're working with best practices, right? So just like a surgeon who is going to do surgery needs to have the top of the line. We need to ensure that our surgeons have the top of the line tools with which to work, the top of the line mastectomy, whatever it is, the top of the line, because that's best practices. And this is Canada. And that's an expectation that we have in this country, is that our whatever it is that we're doing here is at least striving to get to a best practices standard. And that has to be happening in the law as well, especially when it comes to family violence and coercive control. And the good news is that I find steps are being, we are moving forward. And that's something that I find, heartening. But at the same time, I feel like we really need to open our eyes. The community really needs to be aware of what is going on in family court. Family court is the one court most people will engage with, right? Most people are going to engage. If they're going to engage with the law, most people are going to engage in family court. So if it doesn't affect you, it's going to affect your children. It's going to affect your mom, your cousin. Like, this is a court that is going to affect you at some point in your life, if it already hasn't. So, you need to be aware of it, what happens in it.
Yes. And I appreciate the analogy around like the surgeon, kind of like, we always expect a surgeon to, be at kind of, you best use the best tools and, be prepared. And as a mother, I know when I heard the story, because that story is local. It happened in Milton. And as a mom, when I heard that story, I know that it just really shook me, that, to hear that the mom had advocated, had asked for support. And I think there's this idea of this illusion that, like, of what justice will look like in this system. Again, for folks who don't have that experience, you think you take it to the courts and you're going to be safe, and they'll hear you, and but not only was she not heard, but that wasn't it. What she feared most happened. And so really, as a mother, I know, and hopefully viewers who are watching, that resonates, and that, if anything that we can do to support the passing of Kira's life, if there's anything left that from a community perspective for advocacy, do let us know what we can do. But I'm really appreciating that you took the time to just make that connection for us, those of us who don't maybe yet have that experience in a family court. What that experience is like, and what is that experience of justice or not getting justice like. The other piece that I was thinking about, you've been a tireless advocate for the rights of women globally. um, you know and I'm thinking a lot about Iran and what's happening there, and over the last several months, and years before that. Really, we know that this has been a long journey in terms of for justice in that nation, amongst other places. But I wonder if there's anything that you can tell us, because I know how close you are to that advocacy, to that work, to that reality. That is there anything that we, as Halton residents, I think oftentimes maybe we tell ourselves it's happening over there, it's not here, or we don't have any connection. And I don't necessarily believe that, but I'm wondering from your lens, what is it that we need to know about what's happening in Iran that we don't necessarily understand, and how might that support how we can get involved, how we can use our voice to support justice being, getting justice for people who are being persecuted and more in Iran.
Thanks for bringing that up, Leena. So I've been, it's been a very difficult time for all Iranians, including myself, since September 15th, when Mahsa Jina Amini was killed by in the custody of the morality police, which I like to call them mortality police, because that's really more what they are in Iran. And I think that over these months of, advocating for the women in Iran, and then the revolution in Iran, and minorities in Iran, it's been very difficult, because it's been difficult to know what it is that we're doing that is having an effect in Iran. Because as you may be aware, the Islamic Republic government now has up to 20,000 protesters in jail, many of them children. They execute Kurds, so people of the Kurdish minority and the Baluch minority. They execute them daily. The advocacy for the Kurds and Baluch people has always been, unfortunately, very weak. And it's they execute and persecute the Kurds, and have done so with impunity, and the Baluch people. And so, and then not to mention, bludgeoning women and girls to death in the streets, and just the horrifying images that are coming out of Iran that make it appear, Margaret Atwood, when she wrote Handmaid's Tale, used post-revolutionary Iran as her inspiration for that book. I don't know if many people know this. Go Margaret Atwood if you're watching. Mm-hmm. But I think that a lot of people are now watching Handmaid's Tale on because it's now come out on Netflix, and I think people have a hard time connecting that that's a reality in a country of 8 million people. And I think one of the things that's important is everyone knows someone who's Persian or Iranian. Everyone knows, everyone has I have a friend, when you talk to somebody, oh, right, I have a Persian friend. Oh, I have it. And I think one of the things that you need to know is that if I had been living in Iran, if you're my friend, right, had I not left, I could possibly be either dead or in jail being raped, or, on the run, or been in jail and been out of jail, been in jail and been out of jail. So when you think of your Persian friends, just think that had they not been here things they may not be there, drinking coffee with you, or I might not have been here sitting with you. And I think that's a really important thing to do. And I think it's very important to take this conflict out of the political, take the revolution out of the political, right? This is not a political story. This is a human story.
Yes.
And I'm going to say something very controversial. It's not through politics that we are going to find salvation here. Right? It's never been through politics. Politics is always the last kind of like stamp on an event or something that's already happened. Right? So what I think is really important for people, local people who are not Iranians and who are watching this, take it out of the political. Don't think to yourself, I have a lot of friends who are Muslim, and they don't know how to feel because there's always this kind of pressure to have solidarity with other governments or other countries that are the same as you. So that sameness. But in Iran, it becomes very confusing because, the Kurdish people are Sunni Muslim and the Baluch people are Sunni Muslim, and the Islamic Republic of Iran is pushing an agenda that they call Shia Islam, but it has nothing to do with God, right? It becomes very confusing if you want to make it political, right? Yes. If you want to make it something, with whom should we now have solidarity because we're this or we're that religion or we're this religion, so we should have solidarity with this people. Oh, no, we're Orthodox, so we should have solidarity with Putin. It doesn't work that way. That's not the world we live in. Right. And I think that's a very important thing. People need to sit down and say, it doesn't matter that I'm Orthodox. It doesn't matter that I'm Muslim. It doesn't matter that I'm whatever I am. It matters what the truth is. What is the truth? Let me investigate for myself the truth of this situation, because Iran has kind of blown all of those kind of, generalizations out of the window, right? That doesn't matter now anymore. It's just about women. It's about freedom.
Yeah. And how do and it's about humanity. We're human, how do we acknowledge the fellow humanity and the inhumanity that people are experiencing? I think about in my work, the three things that I really have learned to center, and I'm really building on the work of Stacey Haynes, author of The Politics of Trauma. But how do we recognize the belonging, the dignity, and the safety of each human being? If every single person is entitled to that, and if, yes, we have the complexity of, like, as you talked about, identity, religion, whatever that is, that maybe you're like from a default place, well, I see that they're the same religion as me, so I should support them. How do you interrupt that with, wait a minute, before that, what about humanity? And in that, if it was my child, because of, their religion, or my son or my nephew, that they didn't do anything wrong, but simply because of an aspect of their identity that they're somehow deserving. Like, that's just, we need to interrupt that, and maybe to your point, like, really try to bring that back and center it into the conversation. And I appreciate your lens on politics of, like, because sometimes people go, well, we'll leave it to the politicians to figure it out. And I'm a firm believer that community is usually where innovation and transformation comes. So I really just want to acknowledge that, what you shared, and what you have an insight into, and what you've offered to our viewers, that there's a reality that maybe you're not watching the headlines right now, maybe you're not, but to take time to educate yourself, because this is I do believe none of us are free until all of us are free, and the freedoms we enjoy usually come at the price of someone who doesn't get to have freedom. And so there's that connection that I shamelessly make that may not be popular as well. I've been thinking and listening to what you've offered, and I know we have a really short time together, and you do this work day in and day out. One of the things that I've been wondering, and my viewers might have heard me talk about this before, is like, how do you sustain yourself in this work? What does rest, joy, well-being look like for you? How do you resource yourself so you can keep doing this work that I can only imagine, like you were telling us just before we started taping that, like, does your weekend even become your weekend? So just, what is it that keeps you going in this work?
So I'm going to answer that question, but I really was inspired by what you just said before. And I think it's so important to point out, we have to interrupt our default positions, because our default positions come from false equivalencies. Our default positions come from false equivalencies that have been imposed upon us. So in order to interrupt those default positions, we interrupt them by truth and courage, right? Because my father might have a position that's a default position and he's imposing it on me.
Yes.
But in order for me to be a true citizen, I have to work and believe based on truth.
Yes.
And believing that truth and searching for that truth will require a lot of courage, because there may be a lot of people around me who will not agree with me even searching for a truth, because they will believe that there's already this truth. Why do you need to keep searching for a new?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And so it's very important, because if you don't search for the truth, you're always going to be a part of the problem.
For sure. It's this idea of we have to be willing to interrogate the stories we tell ourselves, interrogate who told us those stories, what was their agenda, what was told to them. Because I also recognize historical and like sometimes it doesn't connect to reality. So really appreciate and glad that you took that moment to clarify. And now curious about how do you take care of yourself, and how do you find joy when this is your work day in and day out?
So I travel as much as I can. I have 3 cats, so sometimes that's not possible, but I travel as much as I can. And I do spend a lot of time back in the place that really enriches me, which is Bosnia and Herzegovina. I love going back to the Balkans. And I was just there for almost 6 weeks. So I feel really, inspired. I feel that the spirits of the people who were lost in that country, in a genocidal war, always hover over that country. And I feel they are guiding us in a way to a better place. Whenever I go there, I see, the cathedral, the Jewish, it used to be a synagogue, but now it's a Jewish museum, and it's right across the street from the biggest mosque in the city of Sarajevo. And they all exist together so beautifully. And I feel that that's the future. I find the future in that tiny little patch of land, and it gives me the strength to move forward. I'm also really active in, my Baha'i faith. And I do as much as I can spiritually to be able to sustain a vision of a future that's better than where we are in today.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And you made me think about another question around, what does solidarity look like across movements, or what has your experience of solidarity been? Have you found that activists who are passionate about other causes have come to you and said, how can we support, or what would be the ask? Because I know one of my deep wonderings and one of my definitions of success and equity work is that not only are we engaging meaningfully with difference, we're building solidarity across difference. So I'm wondering, as I ask that, what comes to mind?
What comes to mind to me, just as you asked that, is I have to, I ask myself, what is solidarity for me? Who needs my solidarity in my country? And Indigenous women in this country need our solidarity. We have a duty, a responsibility to support these women, to support any movement that will allow them to find, to have their dignity acknowledged, and to have their contributions to our success. We would not be here if it weren't for them.
Yes.
we would not be here. We wouldn't be able to, we wouldn't know how to survive in -5 weather. Like they taught us, they taught people that came to this country everything that they needed to know to survive. And in return, they got genocide. And we will never be able to make that up to them, but we have to try to do our utmost. And everyone has to think about who they can support, right? I'm not going to ask for support. I'm going to ask, who can I support?
Mm. And maybe we all need to do that. I really love that, where you went with that. And this to me, it's every struggle is intersectional. You know, for us to think that, okay, I'm just LGBTQ, or I'm just, actually, we're all many things. And they do, if we dig deep enough, I feel like the roots of our struggles, if we all turned our attention to those, we'd all be better off. And so I appreciate what you've offered. And I feel like what we've talked about in this, brief 27-ish minutes has really helped to hopefully, for those of us who are activists in the community, to recognize the connection and to not make it feel like there isn't competition, that we're all working towards justice and we all deserve justice. Really, Maryam, I'm really appreciating our time together. I'm just checking our time in this moment and feeling like 27 minutes went really, really quickly. Maybe that one quick response, and then you've given some offers, but maybe that if we have a couple of seconds to be just, what is the one ask of the community, for folks leaving this, even if it's something to read or something to watch or something to do, what would be that one quick ask?
My ask would simply be, don't think political. Do not look at this through a political lens. The political is not the personal.
Thank you yes. And so hopefully that's what viewers, hopefully you're motivated to get out there and educate yourselves. But thank you, Maryam, for your time today. Appreciating, you're so busy. You've got so much that you're working on. Appreciate the time you've given us. And looking forward to having you back. Always, I think this is an ongoing dialogue. To the viewers, thank you so much for coming back and watching week after week. Appreciating your support, your questions, your suggestions for guests. Keep watching. Know that diversity is our strength in this community, and stay tuned, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.